Longtime fans recognize how different Silent Hill 2 was from its predecessor and that the franchise has become a global cultural phenomenon with a devoted fan base. Speakers explain that director Christophe Gans was seen as uniquely suited to bring the story to modern audiences because he himself is a gamer and has always treated the Silent Hill material with fidelity and respect, having worked closely with Konami on the adaptation. Gans describes the plot of Silent Hill 2 as a loose retelling of the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, a poet descending into the underworld to reclaim his beloved, and notes that he had previously admired director Jean Cocteau's own version of the Orpheus story, making it feel natural for him to revisit the myth through this new Silent Hill film. Gans recalls that he was pleased when the first film's release resonated with Akira Yamaoka, the game's original composer and producer, and observes that public perception of video game adaptations has shifted dramatically since that first film came out in 2006. He points out that 15 years later, audiences now accept that an adult-oriented video game can be adapted seriously for the screen. Cast members add that what stayed with them from playing the original game was its melancholic, immersive atmosphere, which spoke to a kind of teenage emotional angst, and they hope theatrical audiences will feel the same way watching the new film that they felt playing the game years earlier, describing the communal thrill of experiencing horror in a cinema. Speakers explain that because the original game was built for the PS2, its creature designs were constrained by the hardware of the time, so some monsters needed to be redesigned for the new film while remaining recognizably the same beings. The creature designer describes returning to sketching these figures freehand, without technical limitations, saying the monsters lived so vividly in his mind that he could draw them loosely and spontaneously using just pen, pencil, and paper, a completely new creative process for him. He notes that every redesign still had to be approved by Konami, as the filmmakers see themselves as stewards of the franchise's broader cultural legacy. Gans says he preserved one of the first film's key ideas, having dancers and acrobats physically embody the creatures rather than relying purely on digital effects, which he feels lends the monsters a disturbing blend of strangeness and physical harmony. Cast and crew describe how these performers bring choreography and movement no ordinary actor could replicate, making sequences like being chased down a hallway genuinely frightening to shoot, and one actor even admits to having nightmares afterward. The design team explains that using real performers as a starting point let them dehumanize a human form through prosthetics and proportion changes, thinning limbs and removing features to arrive at a finished creature efficiently. One crew member says the tactile, practical nature of these effects is part of what personally drew them to the project, and recalls the nurse sequence as especially memorable to direct, crediting choreographer Roberto Campanella, who also worked on the first film. Gans sums up his broader artistic philosophy as seeking beauty within horror and horror within beauty, which he says defines this film and much of his other work. Commentators note that horror as a genre has changed since 2006, with audiences today gravitating toward more psychologically disturbing films that play with perception, which Gans cites as one reason the time felt right to revisit Silent Hill 2. He calls Silent Hill's aesthetic uniquely iconic, a hyper-creative visual language built around twisted, pained human forms, and says he personally sees this new film, Return to Silent Hill, as a more immersive, experiential take meant to pull audiences directly into that world. A collaborator recalls that Gans arrived with an extremely detailed vision, having storyboarded the entire film more than a year in advance, and that the production team's goal was to realize that exact pre-planned vision rather than improvise on set. Colleagues describe him as a highly visual director whose attention to detail across sets, world building, and blending of old and new filmmaking technologies is remarkable, calling him a genuine visionary who perceives things differently from most people. The narration turns to composer Akira Yamaoka, noting he was not only the composer of the franchise's first 4 games, but also served as producer, and that his music gave the series much of its emotional identity beyond mere sound design. In a short Japanese language segment, Yamaoka reflects that ever since the first film, he had always trusted the director's technical skill, but was most struck by his own emotional reaction the first time he saw the footage. Even without added CG, he was genuinely moved and thought, "This movie is incredible." He recalls that during editing, his original game music was already temporarily placed over reference cuts, and it fit so well that he half joked they could simply keep it as is, but the team ultimately re-recorded everything properly. Still, he says he could feel the director's deep love and respect for Silent Hill throughout the process. Other voices add that fans know Yamaoka's melodies by heart and that no other soundtrack in memory carries the same weight, with Gans stating flatly that he told producers early on he could not make the film without Yamaoka's music because he considers himself to be working within Yamaoka's original creative vision and has never forgotten that debt.